Good morning, everybody. This is Chris Dew with E1, and I want to welcome you to our session today, where we are talking about how we can access historical Dynamics SL data right inside of NetSuite without ever leaving. Okay, a quick little agenda that we'll get into right away is we'll cover a couple terms that we'll be using throughout the conversation today. We'll kind of talk about the overall migration strategy that E1 has around this, and then we'll spend the bulk of our time really diving into seeing that historical data inside of NetSuite and everything around that. Okay, I promised a couple of terms. So, first term is Azure Data Lake. This is maybe a new term to some of you. Maybe some of you have been using it for years, but it is something that, to say it a different way, this is basically a storage account inside of Azure that allows us to archive, you know, all kinds of files, and it can be any type of file. It could be a CSV file, it could be a PDF, it could be a Excel file. It doesn't matter what it is. We can put that unstructured data up there, unlike a database, right? With a database, you really had to follow the structure of it. So this is really just a way for us to put information in there. Now, I'll say this, one really big advantage of an Azure Data Lake is that it's a really cost-effective storage mechanism, right? It's something that is really cheap, even if you have, hundreds of gigabytes of data and you need to access it tens of thousands of times a month. It is really, really cheap, and for most people will probably be under $20 a month. What the flip side, though, I think traditionally is that this has been, the Azure Data Lake has been a tool that was really more for developers, right? It wasn't really for the end users. Once getting it there was hard, but then also reporting off of it was really hard. And so that's what we're gonna talk about, how Popdock can help make that easier. Okay, which brings us to the second term, the Popdock Data Lake Upload Tool. This tool, again, we're going to be spending a lot of time in here today, but this is really a tool that aids in that process. And so what it does is allows us to install this on-premise, and then it allows us to extract the data out of your SL system in this case, and then move it to the data lake and make the lists available so that we can embed them right inside of NetSuite, and without, without this being a developer exercise. So that's probably all I'll give you right now on the data lake upload tool, and then we'll come back to that in a bit. All right, I think it's wise to just talk about our overall migration strategy, right? Today, for most of you, you're probably going to have your SL server, your SQL server is probably on premise, or again, maybe there's a few of you that have more of a cloud. Maybe it's been moved to a virtual machine in the cloud, or again, maybe even some of you have moved to Azure SQL. Whatever it may be, we have ways of helping you in those scenarios, and again, extracting the information out and moving it to that data lake. I think it's one thing that is important to note here is that we're primarily talking about Popdock today, but Smart Connect, it can be at play, because Smart Connect is a tool that focuses more on moving data between systems. And one of the key things with a migration, right? If you're moving to NetSuite from SL, you may need to move some of the, the accounts and the customers and vendors and employees and some of those master records. So some of those things you just have to have in the new system, but some of the transactions, it doesn't make sense to go through the complicated piece to move those into NetSuite, for example, and it just kind of muddies up the whole new system that you're trying to move to. So this is where we're talking about how do we make sure you can still access all that history, and that's what Popdock's going to focus on. But I just want to mention Smart Connect is a really great tool that allows you to again interact with it and move those master records over. Okay, But let's get into how do we access the history inside of NetSuite, because this is really the key of what we're going to spend most of our time on today. So with this tool that we're talking about today with Popdock, you are going to be able to do a number of different things. You could pull just the history that came from Dynamics SL. We could actually do a combined list where we pull the history, but we also pull the new information, right? So if we were doing sales line items, for example, I could pull them from the history, and I could also pull it from NetSuite in this case and have one list that had all the information in one spot. We can also even embed this on, certain pages inside of NetSuite. So whether it's the customer, the vendor, the account, whatever it is, we have the capability of putting extra data in there and filtering it down so that we only see the information that is needed. Okay, so let's get into a demo right away. And instead of starting inside of Popdock, I'm going to jump right inside of NetSuite because I want to show you that we basically have a great way of querying all that data. And again, if you were using quick queries in SL, you will find that this is probably even easier or more powerful to use than that. For you that weren't using that, this is a fantastic tool. So I can pull information. Again, I have a bunch of NetSuite type lists. I could be pulling NetSuite data, but in this case, we're kind of focusing on the migration scenario. And so in here, if I wanted to see my AR transactions, for example, and I could choose again which SL company I had. Since I had 5 different companies, I could say, hey, we're going to pull it from Contoso in this case. Or I could pull from multiple companies. I should probably show you that, is if I wanted to, I could choose the graphic design one, and you'll see we get an extra column in here. And I could even, if I wanted to, I could group it by, looks like they're all coming from the one company. So I must not have any in the other company. But if I did, you would see which company it's coming from, which can be really handy sometimes. Okay, let me just clean up that interface, keep it simple. Okay, the things you get to do with the data, even though it's been archived to a data lake, you can still interact with it and say, hey, you know what? I actually really wanted to pull the currency ID and the created date and created user, right? So I can pull those columns on, and now right inside of NetSuite, we can see there's those, here's our currency, the created date, and create user. And if we wanted to move that, around, we can do all those kinds of things. We can filter this, right? We can have an unlimited amount of filters right here inside of NetSuite. I could just keep mashing on this button and say, hey, this needs to, filter down by this and this and this and this. And then when you get it the way you want it, you save it as a favorite, and you can share that with other members of the team. But this is great because I can go across, again, live data from NetSuite, and also, again, my historical. If we wanted to look at some AP transactions, for example, we can pull that in here as well. So there's a quick little view of seeing historical data right inside of NetSuite. It looks and feels just like it belongs, even though it's sitting outside of it in an Azure Data Lake. Okay, so let's talk about how do we actually get the data there. So one of the biggest things I think is, first of all, is connecting to the data. So we're going to be talking about connecting to quick queries to start that process. A really big point, right? When we're connecting to this data, it does happen on your network, right? On the customer's network. And so it doesn't require poking any kind of hole in a firewall or, ports for the SQL Server, exposing that externally. This basically runs on your network, so you never have to open that up for any security concerns at all. Additionally, we can pull all SL lists, and lists really are any type of data that we have in there. So we talk about maybe a list here that's, in this case, a CSV file that was sitting inside of a data lake. It could also be on the SL side of things. It actually essentially is a SQL statement, right? It's pulling from the quick queries, or maybe it's a web service call. So whatever it may be, right? We can pull those, we call them lists, And in this case, right, we're specifying that these lists are those really nice ones that are already created for you on the SL side that allows us to, basically take those views that have maybe information coming from multiple tables. So we have a one place that has all the information you need. Additionally, we have another option that allows us to do the entire SQL database. And so this doesn't do just the Microsoft tables, it actually does any custom products, even if you had a custom table just that you made, it will bring that in as well. So this is what I really call the insurance policy, because it allows us to pull everything in there just in case you need it somewhere down the road. And again, for most people, their goal is to turn off that SQL server at some point, and that's what this tool with Popdock allows you to do. Okay, the second part of this is really where after we've connected to the data, is that we're going to focus on moving it. So again, this is running in your environment, and it doesn't even need to be running on a server. This actually could run on a workstation. It doesn't have to run on the SQL server, doesn't have to have a special server set up. It is something that, again, as long as it is inside of your network, this will run successfully. The second point here is that we'll move data as fast as it can be extracted and uploaded. So let's talk about those two things. We're extracting the data out of that SQL server. So again, if you have 10 gigabytes of data, that's going to go pretty quick. If you have 100 gigabytes of data, it'll take a little longer. If you have a terabyte of data, right, it's going to take a little bit longer. So some of these migrations we've done in 15 minutes. Some have been a few hours. Some have actually been so big that they stretched into multiple days. So just to prepare you for, again, at the end of the day, we're extracting the data out of the SQL server as fast as we can. The second part is after it's extracted, right, we are uploading it to the Azure Data Lake. That's in the cloud. And so we are at the mercy of your internet connection because we are uploading it. And again, some people have a really fast download speed, but don't necessarily have that same performance going up. So that is something that I guess just to keep in mind is that it adds to the equation of how long it's going to take, is basically what I'm saying. And then another key point to this is this actually allows us to fix any errors that may occur. So if we ran into an error in this migration of moving it, it would allow us to see what the error message is, go dig into it, and see that, hey, we need to fix something with this. All right, well, let's get into another demo, and we're going to spend a little bit more time in this demo now, because what I want to show you is really walk you through the entire process of what it looks like to run this. So when you log into the Popdock Data Lake upload tool, you're going to choose what you want inside of here. So we're going to start with those lists, or the quick queries in this case. The first thing it'll have you do is log into your Popdock account. And so I'll do that right now. All right, it's getting there. Okay, the second part is it's asking which data lake connector. So this is an existing connector that was set up inside of Popdock, and then just making sure that we have the right credentials to connect to it, and that's where we're going to put all the extracted information. Now, this next part is what's happening on-prem. And I think a real key thing to look at, you might look at what I have here and go, oh, that's a website. Well, I just happen to have a SQL server that has some exposure to the internet, but it doesn't, you don't have to, right, at all. It is something that for most of you, it probably will look just like the first part, right? It might say SQL Server or something like that at your environment. The other thing is this will be a port. The standard port is 1433. You then pick your system database. This is important because from here we get which companies that you're going to you're going to want to use. So you want to point to the system database, and then we'll log in with the username and password. It does not need to be the SA user. It just needs to be a user that has read access to the Dynamics, or I should say the SL system database and the SL application databases, as well as the capability of being able to run sys objects so that we can get all the metadata about those users. So just so that you know, it does not have to be SA, even though I took the shortcut and put SA in mine. All right, finally, we get all of our SL companies inside of here. So this allows us to see, again, which ones we may want to move. And so in my case, I'm actually going to turn off a couple of them, right? I'm going to say that these are two that I actually, maybe one was a test or sandbox system, and maybe one I haven't used in 10 years. And so I don't really need to archive that data for use any further. Finally, in this case, it's going to pull up all of the lists that we want to move. So it defaults to moving them all, but you don't have to, right? If you want to get rid of some of them and say, hey, we actually only care about AP transactions and AR transactions, or again, probably some GL type stuff. Whatever it is, you have the capability of choosing what you want. And just want to point out a couple things here. You can see George 2. That is obviously not a standard quick query or list. So this is one that I had created inside of the quick query editor. And so what I want to point out is, again, it's all the standard lists, but any of them that you've actually created. So you can even base it on view. I know some people will base it off of a view. You can basically pull in any type of data that you want inside of here. Well, I'm going to go ahead and hit run, and we're going to I'll do it for all three of these companies. You can see amongst the three companies, I probably have about 109 lists in each of those. And so it's cranking through them. You'll see it'll tell you how much is left and how much has been completed. And then, here's an interesting one. How many have been skipped? And so what does that mean? It basically means that we are, if we're not getting any data back when we run that quick query, then we are going to say there's no need to just put an empty file up there. So that's really what this skip status is. So it's cranking away. Maybe what I'll do while we're just waiting for it to wrap up, which it's going pretty quick, but I'll just do one more thing, is inside of Popdock, what it's actually doing is inside of my Azure Data Lake connector, and we called it ADLSL. There we go. You'll see that all those lists are starting to come inside of here. So it's created these lists. If we were to pull up one, like for example, the AP transactions, what we would see is here's all these fields that are in here, and it's pulled the type of data that's coming inside of here. So it's pulling all those strings. If it is a drop-down list, right, it'll actually, might give us a yes, no, or, might have some different options there, which is pretty cool. So we have quantities and currencies. You can change them if you like. It allows us to summarize them. It'll even do some fun things in here. I love this. Look at this. There's already a calculated field in here that basically goes and pulls any related notes. But why I wanted to point this out is even though you might be retiring that SQL server, you can still do some really cool calculated fields with this list that's sitting in an Azure Data Lake. So just to let you know, there's a lot of power inside of here. And then again, we can choose which fields will default. So on this one, it looks like there's about 10 fields. And if we wanted to get rid of some, add a few different ones, we can do that as well. So just wanted to kind of show you that this is where everything goes inside of, and then we'll have our lists that are available for use. If we go back here, look, we can see that it has completed. And we can see that, again, if I sort by this, we had a bunch of them that were skipped. And again, looks like everything else was a success. So none of them failed. We just had successes and ones that were skipped. But let's do this. You can see next to the skipped, and this is also there if there's a failed, is a retry button. So if I click on this, I can rerun the selected failure. So let's say, for example, this one, maybe we had a bad calculation in our quick query, or some bad restriction or something like that. We could, maybe that was the reason we didn't have any records in there. And so after you go and fix it, you could then choose to rerun. And so simply that reran it very, very quickly. Again, it found 0 records because we didn't actually fix anything, but it is a way for us to, again, to work with that. Now, there's another option for us to run this again. And this is, again, we're going to change this to copy tables, because now I'll quickly walk through this. This is that insurance policy, right? So instead of just the list, that probably most people are going to use those because they have all the information you need in one space. But with the lists, you don't necessarily get access to every table in there, and so this is the insurance policy that puts all of them up there, so that just in case, an auditor came and said, hey, I need to know where this came from, you could actually pull up that list and not have to worry about, again, frantically trying to go restore an old SQL server on premise. Okay, last thing, this is all the same. Here's the one difference, right? Remember before we had 5 different companies in here? Now we don't have 5 companies, I have databases. So that's the difference here, is that I have all of the databases that are related to SL, and I can choose which ones I want, and it's going to grab all the tables in there instead. So I won't run this because this will take a little bit longer, but I just wanted to kind of pull that together and show you what that does. Okay, so what you saw there, right? You saw a tool that is pretty quick and easy to work with to extract all your data out on premise securely. I think that's a really key point, is that we did not have to open up any holes in a firewall to make this work. And so your network people will be happy, your IT guys, they will be much happier to not have to do that. It is a really efficient and more importantly, I think, an easy process to move all that data to the Azure Data Lake. As I said, like at the beginning, this is typically a developer exercise interacting with a data lake, but we've tried to make it really, really simple for you to do and not have to, be an expert in that area. The final thing that I'll point out here is that this is really the most important point, is that it doesn't mean anything for us to move it to a data lake if we can't access that data. And so that's probably where most people do struggle with it, is that once it's been moved there, how do we interact with those lists? And like we showed you, it's made available right inside of the NetSuite interface. And so we can actually do all of the same queries, all the filtering, add new columns right inside of NetSuite. And even though it's SL data, it looks and feels like the NetSuite system that we put it inside of. So that's kind of our key to this, is that we want to make sure that your end users have all the access they need to that history without hunting around in 100 different places. Okay, let's jump in and answer any questions that are out there. Again, if you do have a question, I encourage you to put it into the questions pane of the GoToWebinar, and we'll get through as many as we can today. Okay, first question I got is, will Popdock allow us to combine the data between the data lake and NetSuite? Yeah, I did mention it very briefly at the beginning, but basically we have Popdock, we have a custom list called a merge list. And so a merge list allows us to take information from the Azure Data Lake and also the live information from NetSuite, put it into one list, and then we can make that show up right inside of NetSuite. And so you don't have to go to multiple places. You can just say, here's all my sales history or vendor history, or maybe it's inventory history, whatever it is, you can pull those two together. Okay, next question is, Okay. Will this tool work with other products? Looks like they gave an example of GP or nav. Yes, it will. You may, if you had a quick eye, both of those were actually options that were in there. So if you are maybe at one of our partners out there that's looking at this, we can use this same tool to extract information out of Dynamics GP or Dynamics Nav, on premise, and make that available for use, wherever you need to. Okay. Another question is how. Okay, let's see. Okay, I understand it now. It's basically asking, um, can this work with SQL, or sorry, Dynamics SL 2015? The answer is yes. We can go back as far as SL 2011. And the reason to that is that's when quick queries were introduced. And so that's as old as we can go on the quick queries. Now you can do the SQL database option even on a version prior to that, because we don't necessarily need the quick queries for that. So we can move all of the tables, but the special capability of moving the lists has to be SL 2011 or greater. Okay, looks like somebody's typing. Okay, well, I think we'll make this the last question then. If you do have more questions, I'll give you another form to ask them. The last question was, can we display information from other systems inside of NetSuite? So yeah, kind of some of the same principles that we talked about in here. We happen to be showing information from an Azure Data Lake, but I actually did inside of NetSuite, I had information that could have came from HubSpot, from Salesforce, whatever it is. We can pull information from all kinds of places. That's really what Popdock is very, very good at. And so again, it's probably outside of the migration scenarios that we're talking about today, but it's still a great way if you want to make all that data available in one place. You can do that with Popdock. Okay, so that's the last question in there. I want to thank everybody for their time today. If you do have additional questions, please send us a message to sales@e1solutions.com, and we'd be happy to answer those for you. Thank you and have a wonderful day.